All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 TV show in the United States of America and Poland and Mexico. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I am going to be showing you my James Michener collection of books. Used to be bigger, I will admit. Here's the thing: I used to have a bunch of the hardcovers. It's just too hard, and all of the paperbacks. It's just too hard. It was just becoming too difficult to track down good copies of all the hardcovers. So I basically gave up on that a couple of years ago and just donated all of my hardcover James Michener novels that I had, which weren't that many, maybe a handful. Donated them all to the state prison library. I did keep Alaska though, because it's one of my favorite novels of all time. So I did keep a hardcover of that. But let's look at the paperbacks I have, because I pretty much have most everything he's done, except for some of his shorter novels. But I've got all of his major works right here. And so I'm going to show them to you because he's one of my favorite writers. And we'll go over them individually a little bit and talk about them. And let's just start with Alaska. If you've seen my top 10 favorite novels of all time book rankings video, you will know that this book, Alaska, finished pretty high up on that ranking. So I got to represent I've got a paperback, I've got a hardcover, and I've also got the audible.com version of Alaska, one of my favorite. Now, the reason Alaska is one of my favorite novels of all time is partly because I grew up in Alaska, in Fairbanks, Alaska. So I try to collect a lot of Alaska stuff, and stories set in Alaska intrigue me. I relate to the subject because I lived there, and this is just a great, thick, huge novel about Alaska and its history and its peoples, how it was. If you want to know about James Michener books, if you want to just delve into a James Michener book and just get to feel of what they're all pretty much like, pick up Alaska. You will learn everything you ever wanted to know about the state of Alaska, from the way that it was formed in ancient times, the way that the landmass was formed, the continent was formed by volcanoes, this, that, and the other, how and I'm rereading this right now, and I'm going to do a massive, massive book review of Alaska. So I won't get into it right now. Just wait for that book review. But that is the beginning of my collection. So we start my collection in grand high fashion with just Alaska. We'll put this right here. And let's go through the other books in no particular order. For instance, the Caribbean. The Caribbean. A great look at the history of the Caribbean, from the time the islands were formed in the Caribbean and the oceans to modern day. And it's just like a grand adventure of all the cool things that ever happened in the Caribbean. Now, James Michener, the way he sets up these stories, they're all big, huge books, all of them like 1,000 pages each or longer. And he sets up these stories and tells the history of a certain part of our planet, whether be it Alaska or the Caribbean, and he talks about how this place formed geologically and geographically, who settled it, and all of these are told in short stories of about 100 pages each, where you get like about 10 short stories set throughout periods of time in the history of these places. And by the time you've read all the short stories, you understand the history of Alaska, the people that settled it, the pirates that sailed the Caribbean, all the adventures they had, all the wars that happened in this place. That's kind of the gist of every single one of these novels, just to give you an idea. So he did that with Poland too. If you want to know everything you wanted to know about Poland is contained in this great novel of stories about Poland, its history and its citizens, all the adventures, wars and castles and fights and everything. The Source. The Source is about the area around Israel, Jerusalem, pretty much the entire history of the Jewish people, from biblical times up until today. It's just a great look, and it's huge. It's huge. It's a massive, massive book. Centennial. This is his big, huge Western novel. It's basically the history of Colorado. They could have just called it Colorado. Now, this is probably one of his most popular works. This was turned into a mini-series in the 70s or 80s. A really popular mini-series of just a great Western adventure. Just talks about the formation of the Rocky Mountains and the plains and the native peoples that lived there and settled there, and how all that worked out, and how, you know, the English colonialized the West and all of the things that go along with it. It's got great action adventure, gunslingers, farmers, cattle ranchers, you know, Indians. Just a magnificent adventure novel. Let's go to Mexico. He does the same thing with Mexico. Everything you wanted to know about Mexico and its history right there in one book. He has Chesapeake. A great, great novel. I really liked this one. Every single thing you wanted to know about the Chesapeake Bay, from the time of its formation, 1,000,000 years ago, until today, and Washington, D.C., and all that. Texas. He did the same thing with Texas. Probably his biggest book, even bigger than Alaska, and it's Texas. Want to know the history of Texas? It's a great Western novel, just like Centennial. The Covenant. The Covenant, the history of South Africa. He should probably just call it South Africa. But this is the history of South Africa from the time it was formed in millions of years ago. All the peoples that lived there, hunted there, made their lives there. The English colonialization of the place again. Great book. Hawaii. Hawaii. He does the same thing with Hawaii. I would say this is my second favorite of the Michener books after Alaska. This is all about the discovery of Hawaii, about the native, the Polynesian culture that was there before anybody else, and then the discovery of it and the colonialization of Hawaii, again, by the English and the Spanish and the French and whoever else floated by. Space. Hey, why not do a history of outer space and the space race? And this is a great novel about our early attempts to go into outer space, and the men and the brave men and women and astronauts and scientists that put all that together. Just a great, great novel. I think they made this into a mini-series also. Now, some of his smaller novels, not necessarily history novels. I mean, these novels here are just not history novels of one particular place. These are like just actual novels. And honestly, I haven't read any of these yet. So these, I admit, I have not read. Sayonara. I don't know what it's about. It looks like it's about a World War II love story set in Japan. We'll see. Tales of the South Pacific. This book was the big book that broke James Michener out. I mean, here's a little nugget. James Michener didn't even publish novels until he was about 50 years old. Now, once he was 50 years old, with this novel was his big breakout. He became hugely famous, and he wrote all of these things between the ages of 50 and when he died. So for those of you that are writers out there, and you're thinking, oh, I'm getting old, it's never going to happen for me, James Michener didn't get published till he was 50. And look at the huge career he ended up having. One of the biggest selling novelists of all time. Got a late start, never too late to start. Tales of the South Pacific. This was his big breakthrough hit. It even spawned a musical or a Broadway play or a, what are those movies that are sing-along, like Sound of Music? Oklahoma, Grease. Those movies where are they just called musicals? I don't know. This was the basis of Caravans. I don't know what this is about. Anyway, eventually I'll read it and review it, and then we'll find out what it's about. And then, last but not least, is Drifters. I think this is his hippie novel. I think this is about hippies that just travel the world naively and get themselves into lots of trouble. I'm just guessing. Just guessing based off of the title and the cover. I could be way off. Anyway, that right there, my friends, is my entire James Michener book collection. I think he's one of the best novelists ever. All of his books are full of amazing action and adventure, great history. You can learn so much about the world and our planet just by reading these books alone. Check them out.